First off, let me say this, moving away from different hardware tiers, Boost, Ultra, Infinite, to just having a base subscription and add-ons is incredibly stupid and makes it more complicated, not less. I'd say the current base subscription at $30 per month is absolutely not worth it because of the CPU bottleneck. You should get the power upgrade at $45 per month or not use Shadow at all in my opinion. The hardware in the $30 per month base subscription is just laughably bad value compared to the power upgrade at $45 per month. It is so terrible that a $600 subpar pre-built PC can rival Shadow's base performance in many of the latest AAA games despite having a lesser GPU. The upcoming power upgrade is worth it if what you want is the convenience of a gaming PC in the cloud and none of the hassles of building your own PC or issues with subpar pre-built PCs. But also keep in mind that a lot of the functions of a cloud PC can be achieved with remote gaming apps like Parsec if you have good home upload. However, another point is that Shadow's streaming client has way better touch controls on mobile. Shadow is not worth it if you want it as a better or cheaper alternative to building your own PC because you can build a rough equivalent to the power upgrade for around $1,200 with all new parts right now at current prices. At the price of the power upgrade, it'll take you around 2.5 to 3 years to save up enough money to build an equivalent machine. Purely based on cost as a competitor to owning a physical PC, it is not worth it, so do not get into cloud PC gaming with the mindset that it'll completely obsolete home PCs. There is a link to this mock-up build in the video description. That is for a rough estimate and not build advice. I do not know about the reputation/quality of those specific parts. Now let's talk about the CPU and the power upgrade and why I believe only having 4 cores is unavoidable in a subscription at a price of $45 per month. You only get 4 CPU cores in the power upgrade, but a lot of games don't need more cores. Based on benchmarks I see online, the single-threaded performance is a bit worse than the R9 5950X. 1371 versus 1686 in Geekbench 5, or 81% of the single-threaded performance. The 12th gen Intel CPUs and Ryzen 5800X 3D have much better single-threaded performance than even that, but it's a vast improvement over the base subscription's 786 single-threaded performance in Geekbench 5. The CPU is still potentially theoretically a bit worse than a budget Intel $100 CPU, but at least it's not massively weaker. To really know the exact performance numbers, we'll have to actually run CPU benchmarks on the power upgrade, so assume the difference could be a bit better or worse than anticipated. Also keep in mind that Turbo Boost will improve single-threaded performance, but the EPYC CPU being shared means it'll have to run always at its all-core turbo clock speed. So the consumer CPUs have an advantage in being able to turbo boost higher when fewer cores are being utilized, but the server CPU has to assume all the cores are being utilized to 100% because the other users on that CPU could be doing that. Also keep in mind that the consumer CPUs with really good single-threaded performance only has that when it's not using all of its cores. As an example, overclocking 16-core Ryzen CPUs actually decreases single-threaded performance because you're disabling turbo boost. The quad-core i3-12100F's multi-threaded performance might not be much better than the 4 cores in the power upgrade, or maybe worse. We really can only know by running benchmarks on the power upgrade. It is disappointing that you'll only get 4 of the cores instead of 6 or 8. Perhaps they determined that allocating more cores would increase price too much, and they wanted to keep it simple by only having 1 add-on. I disagree with limiting options for the sake of keeping it simple, since an add-on is functionally not any different from having multiple hardware tiers, and actually more complicated, but that's probably their reasoning. Keep in mind that by allocating more cores per user, they're getting fewer GPUs per server. That results in the cost of shared components like motherboard and PSU going up per user. It is a lot more complicated than just 50% more cores per user equals 50% more CPU cost per user. Shadow has selected the best data center CPU that they could currently feasibly use without delaying even longer and should result in vastly better CPU performance than what's currently in the base subscription. Technically, the 75F3 CPU would have a few hundred megahertz better clock speed than 7543P, but it has more power consumption, and probably costs more, driving up the cost for users, which is probably why Shadow didn't choose it, and that's fine. While data center CPUs with more cores would allow more users per server or more cores per user, it would have worse clock speeds and thus worse gaming performance. It's a balancing act between single-threaded performance and multi-threaded, and I will always prefer better single-threaded performance. Realistically, in an unlimited use subscription model, Shadow could not have used a better CPU. They have to use data center CPUs to keep costs from skyrocketing. Pay-by-the-hour services use consumer desktop CPUs, but they cost a lot more if you play a certain amount of hours a month, and you have to worry about wasting a ton of money if you forgot to shut down your cloud PC. In order for Shadow to rival the CPU performance of consumer CPUs, they'd have to use actual consumer CPUs, and that would skyrocket the cost because they'd lose the economy of scale. Let's talk about the price of Shadow. I think Shadow's extremely cheap boost-tier hardware spoiled everyone, myself included. The CPU sucked, and still does, but it was acceptable because it was extremely cheap. Now that the price of the base subscription is back up without a CPU upgrade, it is an absolutely terrible value. Shadow really should have waited until they upgraded at least the CPU before raising the price of the base subscription. This is a cloud PC, not a cloud console. The price of xCloud, GeForce Now, Stadia, etc. are not fair comparisons because they are limited in the software that you can access. It is like comparing the cost of a PS5 to the cost of a PC. Of course it's cheaper. But you're not taking into account the cost savings of not having to repurchase your PC games and access to platforms with cheaper games. Yes, GeForce Now's best hardware is more powerful than Shadow's upcoming power upgrade, but it is still a limited library of games, and gaming is all you can do on it. You can't play any DRM-free games you've purchased, such as from Humble Bundle or any emulators. I subscribed to 6 months of GeForce Now's RTX 3080 tier, and I absolutely wasted it because the types of games that I like to play weren't on it. Certain publishers like Activision block their games from going on GeForce Now because if they can't force a repurchase on a cloud console like Stadia, they don't want them on cloud gaming at all. They're extremely greedy and short-sighted, ignoring the possibility of new purchasers buying their games because there's suddenly a new platform where they can play them. Now that Activision is bought by Microsoft, there's no way their PC games will go to GeForce Now, a competitor to xCloud. Another important point is the pre-order process. You shouldn't have to be subscribed already to pre-order the power upgrade. Paying $30 per month for a service you don't want that doesn't perform very well, especially on the CPU, just to get the chance of in several months to be able to pay for the power upgrade is extortion. We don't really know how much availability this power upgrade will have, so a lot of people could end up waiting over a year to get access to the service that they actually want if it's like the Ultra/Infinite situation. If you have to be an active subscriber to pre-order, that will be really expensive paying for a service you don't want. If you can't pre-order the power upgrade without being an active subscriber, I just won't resubscribe until I can go straight to the plan that I want. I'm selling my gaming PC to my brother, so I'll be getting back on Shadow when the power upgrade becomes available. I'll be using the money from selling my PC to pre-order the Viture XR glasses from Kickstarter, which has now ended. I don't really mind too much wasting value by selling my PC since I'm selling it to my brother. It's going to be pretty interesting trying out Shadow on those Viture One XR glasses. I could have done it with my gaming PC via Parsec, but this gives me some money to put towards other things.